Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently Sunday, February 19th, 2010, and this is a Day 9 Daily, and it is the 422nd Day 9 Daily, where we're going to learn to be a better gamer. Today's hairstyle, Rhino Spike. Aw, yeah. Be careful if Day 9 comes a charging. Oh, yeah, my chair is still squeaky. That's right, it will forever be loud, and that's fine because it helps give this daily a little bit of color. Oh, awesome. Excellent. In today's Day 9 Daily, we're going to be learning all about LiquidRet and his ultra standard Zerg vs. Protoss. Because, you know, I've was looking back through a lot of the topics, and in general, there's a lot of focus on the new styles and the new evolutions of play, the fringes that are somewhat unexplored, especially, for instance, last Thursday when Sheth and I literally tried to hammer away at a strategy for about an hour and a half. We did it for about another hour and a half after we got off the show. However, there's nothing wrong with just doing standard stuff with some nice, normal, beautiful, clean, pretty timings in there. So what we're going to be doing in today's daily is we're going to look at a game between TQ State and LiquidRet, where we're going to see not just that LiquidRet is playing standard, but we're going to look at all the reasons why. And perhaps the most important thing of all to emphasize is that what works for me is highly dependent on knowing all of his timings. Oh, excuse me. It was one of those burps that keeps getting to here, and then it's like, no, I'm not coming. So what I do is I just punch myself repeatedly, and for some reason that makes me feel empowered. Now, I want to talk briefly about that whole notion of the knowing more about his timings than practically about your own timings. If you download 10 different Protoss vs. Zerg players and look at when those early attacks come, you'll start to see those patterns, like about the earliest that a 4 warp gate push can happen if he's early expanded is around 7 minutes and 45 seconds. That's about as early as it'll happen. What's the earliest time a Void Ray will end up arriving at your base? Generally around 8:30-ish, 8:15-ish. It's pretty damn early. And you start to get used to all these kinds of timings. The one thing that can be very, very painful and very threatening when you're trying to think about what your Protoss opponent is doing and how to respond is you get in these traps where you do this like, okay, I'm coming up on 8 minutes. He could be 4 warp gating me. He could be going for Void Rays by 8:15 or 8:30. Hell, he could even be coming up with a big 6 gate push at 8:30 or 9 minutes. I got to start defending right now. And you make a whole bunch of units. And you know what happens? Nothing. He just doesn't attack. So what happens is, all the time you should have been spending building drones, you built all these units for these attacks that you kind of had in your head. You'll notice, or how do I want to say that? Yeah, this is the problem that happens when people learn about timings for attack, but not quite what to do with them. So when we watch LiquidRet play, he's well aware of all the possible timings of attack. So we're going to be taking a ton of looks at right now, there could be an attack coming. Notice that he makes 2 units and then does a bunch of checks. Notice that here's another attack that could happen. He makes a couple of units and then he does a whole bunch of checks. Because the last thing you want to get into is that trap of knowing when he could attack, preparing for that attack, and then the attack doesn't come. So we're going to know a lot about Protoss timings. Of course, before we do the daily, just wanted to note that, Fun Day Monday's tomorrow. Yes, and it is the Baneling Explosion Fun Day Monday. Show me a replay where you kill so much stuff with burrowed Banelings. Send it to monday@day9.tv. Sure, carpet bomb Banelings, Baneling drops, Baneling flanks are fun, but it's the burrowed Banelings that I want from you. Fantastissimo. The last thing I want to talk about before we end up doing the daily is that in general, with standard kinds of plays, or just any build that's labeled as standard, the prevailing feel to it is that when I make an attack, it should be a game-ending attack. Sure, I might not win the game with it, but its goal is to end the game right then and there. And if I can't end the game right then and there, or it's unlikely that I'll do that, I probably shouldn't make that attack. More and more often, we're seeing timings where that simply is not the case. Last week, we looked at a game by Naniwa in his Protoss vs. Terran style. I think that was Wednesday's daily last week. And Naniwa did a big attack against the Terran player that wasn't intended really to win. It was intended to just kill off some units at the front. And that means that the Terran can't drop us. In this game, we're also going to be seeing, in the sort of mid to late game, Zerg is just going to start barreling down the Protoss' front door just to deal with the Protoss who's fairly low on Colossus. So, other than that, I jumped right into the topic today. What on earth? Is there anything else I need to talk about other than my amazing Rhino Spike? I looked in the mirror before I started and I was like, wow, that's like a triangle. It looks like a really terrible old graphics cards trying to render my hair, and it just made a frickin' triangle and put bars, big brown bars in front of it. But this ain't a trick, baby. What you see is what you get. Another very exciting news, I've just purchased the entire compendium of Sam & Max. Oh, adventure gamers! I love old school graphic adventure games. Seriously, I love, even like the old interactive fiction ones like Zork. Oh, it's so great. I love being like 4 hours into one of those games and not realizing that I'm totally screwed and there is no way to win literally, and the game just doesn't tell you. And one of the most common things in one of those sorts of games is you just have to restart it and begin it from scratch. Not the new games, like the Sam & Max games from Telltale. Those are pretty suave. But still have a special place in my heart for all those wonderful games. Maybe I'll play Planetfall after this. I just don't know. Gonna hop into the daily now. Aw, yeah. Look at this screen. Coming on in. We got LiquidRet up here in the top side, and we have TQ State spawning down here in the Southlands. So we're going to begin the game by hitting the play button and beginning the game. Now, I guess I kind of want to do this thing where I throw down the very early... is the sound on? You bet your ass it is. You bet your ass it is. When do I forget the sound? I can't believe you would accuse me of that. Sound is on and good to go. It's important to start knowing a couple of very early timings. See, already we can see that there's a pylon going down. Let's look at when our good friend TQ State is going to be building himself either a forge or any sort of other structure, maybe a gateway. Pops in, sees that there's an early pool down. And look at this, around 2 minutes, a little before 2 minutes, is when a fairly early forge will go down. A pretty dang early forge. I'm starting to like more and more using times to remember things instead of using food to remember things. But it kind of depends on the task. The important thing is that you know whatever works for you to stick with that. But an important aspect is to make sure that there's some flexibility with it. For instance, if I have been going hatch first my whole life, I can say something like, when I build my hatchery, that's around the time that he will have his forge half done. You can make these sort of statements like that. But if all of a sudden you abandon that, you start going 10 pool, you lose all this other timing information. So maybe have some way to translate that over there. But, you know, 2 minutes is when the forge goes down. I'm going to be talking about a lot of times. Some of these are pretty seemingly meaningless times, but even so, LiquidRet can now comfortably know that this is about when a forge should end up plopping down. Now, to note, we're going to see LiquidRet do something a little unusual. This is actually an 11 pool after his Overlord. And this is pretty uncommon. Generally, we see a 14 pool. We see sometimes gas pool around 14. But Rhett, right off the bat, is going to be getting himself 2 sets of Zerglings and a Queen. And then goes ahead and expands. Now, you'll notice that Rhett doesn't have enough to build this early expansion. Have you ever had that annoying thing happen where you have to plant down that pylon right there? Or there's a pylon planted down right here and you have to avoid that? Well, not really with this build. You're actually fine in LiquidRet's position with this amount of Zerglings and this timing. It's a very easy way to always guarantee your timings. And of course, LiquidRet is going to be pulling back right away. Now, as LiquidRet begins stepping forward, we'll see that already a cannon is down at the front of the base. There is this gateway going up, and there is this nexus popping up. Now, what I want to do is pause for just a brief period of time and note that what is happening in TQ State's front is about as normal a look as you will get. TQ State has built no pylon early on. TQ State has done no other craziness. He's just gotten these 2 pylons, this gateway, this forge, this cannon, and this nexus. That is as basic as it gets for TQ State. Now what I'm going to do is something I try not to do that much, but we're going to be forced to do just for the purposes of thinking. This gateway takes 1 minute. Oops. If you come to a probe, you'll notice that a cybernetics core, starts or has a 50-second build time. I hope you can see that with the overlay. Yeah, you can. Great. 50 seconds. So that's 2 minutes. Okay, well what about Stargate? Takes another minute. How long does a Void Ray take? A full minute. Even with 2 chrono boosts, it takes 40 seconds. So literally from gate start to when a Void Ray pops out is about 4 minutes of time. This is an important concept that I call relative timing. It's not he gets a Void Ray at X food. Or it's even hell, something like what I said earlier, about as early as a Void Ray can happen is going to be around 8:15. Something like that. It's about when the Void Ray will get to your base. It's way more useful, though, to keep these relative timings in your head. To be able to look here and go, oh, cool, his gateway just started now. Add 4 minutes to it. About 7 minutes and 45 seconds is the earliest a Void Ray could appear, let alone arrive at my base. Isn't that kind of useful? Well, you might say, no, I still don't get it. Why is that useful? Let's say your Protoss player goes nuts. Let's say he builds a pylon at the front of your, like right here in your base, and you have some probes wandering around, or some Zerglings wandering around trying to kill it off, and he builds a gateway right here, blocking your hatch again. Urgh. It's really annoying, right? But you'll get to his base and find that his gateway was heavily delayed. He might start his gateway at 4.5, 5 minutes after, well, actually 5 minutes is pretty damn late, but hell, he might start at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, 4 minutes and 45 seconds. All of a sudden, it's like 9 minutes, the earliest that you need to worry about any sort of Void Ray coming at you at all. It's like 8 minutes and 30 seconds is like the fastest that he can get Warp Gate up if he's building his gateway that late. So these relative timings are going to help us a lot. One thing that is quite nice for LiquidRet is that he knows that this cannon pretty much always has to be built. Pretty much always. There are some pretty dastardly bastard Protosses who will build their gateway at around 320, and that extra 20 seconds ends up being pretty critical later on. But for any Protosses that try to get away with it, LiquidRet will easily run up into the main base pretty comfortably. Delicious focused liquid. Yes. And I do indeed have about 3 beverages in front of me. We got some water, we got some tea, and we got some coffee. So good. The tea is from earlier today, but I figure that you should just know that. So it looks like TQ State is continuing to just do his usual shenaniganry. The important person we want to focus on is LiquidRet. And I'm actually going to remove this production tab. Oh no, how in the dark we feel. Oh, this is terrible. This is something that I think you get spoiled with if you do what I do and watch, like, you do commentary in a tournament. You're always seeing what both players are doing, always. This is the valuable point of view for learning things right here. Oh, crap. I don't see anything. Oh, no. I'm going to be talking about standard in today's daily? Holy cow. LiquidRet is going to be adding on as much larva as he humanly frickin' possibly can. He makes sure to generally have them lined up, but even if they get a little split off, like see how it's half done and this one's just started, LiquidRet is still a total boss and can puke that larva on just in time. Generally, you want to have this hatch getting started before the 5-minute mark, but if you build this second queen, that's fine. Just getting this hatch down as early as possible is the thing I'd emphasize if you're trying to do DAT standard play. And I think also important to note, a good Protoss will scout you. He just will. He'll know you can't have Zergling speed yet, and he'll just march forward and see what's up. So having this sort of early creep spread is one of the advantages to getting 2 early queens. This creep will help you kill off any probe that would try to be sneaky and break into your base. Excelente. Ret literally gonna go the all drone route. Aw, yeah. And it's at this point in time that I kind of want to mention to you that it's not so critical to be getting this Overlord into his base. It's not really that critical. In terms of a lot of what he can do, which would be really fast warp gate, he could be going for like a really fast Stargate here, something like that. The important thing is that a lot of these attacks are going to happen between 7 minutes and 30 seconds and 9 minutes. That's the window where an average, everyday, usual, typical Protoss is going to be throwing some stuff at us. I'm going to throw that out right now, just so we can see the remaining preparations that Rhett is going to make for those. When we hop into part 2, we're going to really examine thoroughly how Rhett isn't messing any of this up. But still, I think it's quite valuable to note that up to this point in time, Rhett is literally only making a ton of drones. I generally wouldn't back up, but the first two Geyser timings are just so freaking huge. When Rhett is at 36 food. Just pretty straight, comfortably clear, just so you can see it. 36 food is all you really need to know. I seriously wish that there was some way that I could have this up and like not have any of Protoss' stuff up. I guess I will leave this up at some point here, but still important to note that Rhett is literally only making dronies. Only making drones. Dronesy, 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 dronesy. Life is but a dream. Now, ordinarily, I'd probably have like another 5 minutes of content, and then we go to part 2. Probably just going to do another 2 or 1 minutes of content. So I'll just say a couple of extra things, but right before we hit 7 minutes. These overlords that are positioning themselves around, and this is obviously good stuff to, you know, have an overlord here and have some overlords at these key positions around here. But I don't want you to think that necessarily you have to get in and see precisely what's going on in the Protoss base. You don't really need to see exactly everything that's going on. You just need to have a basic, broad approximation. And as long as you do a couple of other prep things, you're going to be in good shape. For instance, these two Zealots that move forward, what does Rhett make in response? Just a couple of Zerglings. He just saw them moving out and built a couple of Zerglings. Nothing more deep to it than that. Obviously, Protosses like to do that to get in the way of the drones a little bit, but right around 7:30 is when we'll generally have to build, oh there it is, generally have to build a Roach Warren. This is generally around the time when that really ends up being fairly needed. So, without any further ado, I am going to step away to a break, and when we come back, what we're going to talk a lot about is this next key 90 seconds, because it's in this period that I think the most number of mistakes possible are made, and we want to try to avoid making all these mistakes while still having all the defense needed if we do, and still making all the drones if he's not going to be attacking us. So we're going to do that in part 2. Wahoo! Yippee, etc.